Senator Polley.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Deputy President. I rise tonight to speak about the Coalition's technophobia and how the opposition leader refuses to grasp the many benefits that will flow from the National Broadband Network. Recently, the Joint Standing Committee on the NBN released its fourth report examining the NBN's rollout performance. I note that typically misguided comments of Senator Simon Birmingham during the tabling of the report and the confused directionless content of the Coalition's dissenting report. But of course, when it comes to distorting information and presenting few viable alternatives for Australia's broadband policy, those opposite me in the chamber have formed. Over the last several years, the opposition leader has embarrassed himself on numerous occasions when it comes to discussing the NBN. Few of us forget his clumsy performance on the 7:30 report when he confessed that he wasn't a tech head. In fact, when quizzed on the basics, the absolute basics of roughly how many towers the opposition would have to build to implement his plan, he responded that he was no Bill Gates. Well, for once, Mr Abbott, I agree with you. You are no Bill Gates. In fact, you don't have any real understanding of broadband policy, and your own party's plan isn't good enough. If you are confused about the Coalition's broadband policy, you aren't the only one. At various points, the opposition leader has indicated that he will demolish the NBN, but the opposition plan has, at some points, drifted closer to the government's NBN model. In fact, in June last year, his communications spokesman indicated he would, and I quote, complete the job of the NBN Co. But Mr Turnbull has consistently failed to flesh out the Coalition's telecommunications policy, promising something different every week. As the Communication Minister commented last year, he made 684 tweets, issued 23 press releases and delivered 7 public speeches in 2012, but did not release a broadband policy. Also, Mr Turnbull says he cannot yet quantify the cost of his policy, and I use the term very loosely. As we understand, Australia's telecommunications infrastructure just hasn't kept pace with the needs of Australians. Many other countries, such as Japan, are moving ahead with fibre to the home broadband options, but the Coalition doesn't seem to recognise that this is the future. They just aren't up to speed. Pun intended. I think the following comment from the opposition leader in July last year says it all. Asked about Australia's state of infrastructure, he said the NBN was, and this is a direct quote, a $50 billion investment with borrowed money that we don't need. What we do need, he said, and I quote again, is much more money being spent on our roads, our rail and our ports. Of course, Australia needs continued development of its roads, rail and ports, another area neglected under the Howard government. But in the 21st century, fibre optic cables are absolutely essential to the modern Australian economy. The NBN is not a white elephant, Mr Abbott. It is the future of this country's telecommunications policy. It would appear that the opposition leader's primary concern is opposing the NBN to gain a perceived political edge. He is opposed to it because the party is intent on thwarting what will be a valuable infrastructure development that will revolutionise the lives of Australians. Like any other policy initiative announced by the government, when it comes to the NBN, the opposition leader is a wrecker, not a builder. He can't explain the basics of his own broadband policy, not only because he isn't a tech head, but because he doesn't genuinely believe in it or understand it. As long as he can criticise the government's NBN for being too ambitious and expensive, nothing else matters to him. There was another scheme which in its time was criticised for being too big, too expensive and a waste. It was the Snowy Mountain Hydro scheme. At the time, Australians heard that it may prove irrelevant, a white elephant even, because atomic power would completely replace the hydro scheme. This is just the same sort of argument we're hearing now from those opposite when they furrow their arms around and doubt the value of fibre versus wireless. Australians rely on capable internet speeds for a variety of commercial and personal uses, and overall we are enthusiastic users of the internet. The problem is that after 11 years of infrastructure neglect under the former coalition government, we have fallen considerably behind in terms of global internet speeds. It is a fact that those opposite me in the chamber should be ashamed of. This was a key factor in why the rural independents didn't back the opposition leader. The independents knew that the NBN was vital for remote and regional Australia, and they knew that the opposition leader didn't understand the NBN. It must keep the opposition leader awake at night. Depending on who you listen to, he was willing to offer everything to Andrew Wilkie. He was willing to double our refugee intake. He was willing to offer a $200 million zonal tax trial. He was perhaps even willing to sell his own backside. But you can't fake sincerity, and you can't fake awareness, and you can't fake an appreciation of why...
Senator Polley. Senator, point of order.
Point of order, Madam Acting Deputy President. I think those comments were totally unparliamentary, and the Senator her attention needs to be drawn to them and ask her to withdraw those remarks.
Senator Polley.
I think those actual terminologies about what Mr Abbott was prepared to do was actually a quote from Mr Windsor. I think it's on the public record that he said that Mr Abbott was prepared to sell himself.
Thank you. Senator Payne.
Sorry. Further to the point of order, Madam Acting Deputy President. I've previously been asked to withdraw similar words used in quotes by the now President, and I think that Senator Kroger's point of order is correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Polley, I ask you not to repeat those words as you continue your contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy President. But you can't fake sincerity, and you can't fake awareness. You can't fake an appreciation of why fast broadband speeds are so vital. He begged for the top job. He pleaded. He cajoled. He demanded. He did everything he could to think of. But he never understood the importance of the NBN, and he had no alternative to offer the independent MPs. In the end, of course, NBN was a clincher. It was the issue the independent MPs kept coming back to, and it was an issue where the Labor Party held such a clear advantage over the coalition. It must keep Mr Abbott awake. Certainly in Tasmania, it was the clincher to why we were so successful at the last election. Shame on you, Mr Abbott, for seeking to cynically exploit the NBN and lower the standard of public debate once again. Shame on you, Malcolm Turnbull, for ignoring your better judgment, for betraying the sort of moderate Conservatives who value the NBN, the same people who consider you their leader in exile. Shame on you, National Party members and senators, for not speaking up, for not pushing harder against the stance adopted by the partner in the arms of the Liberal Party, particularly since you know that the NBN will benefit your targeted constituents in remote and regional Australia more than anyone else. Shame on you. For the people of Tasmania, along with the Australians everywhere, they are eager to take advantage of the NBN, construction of which recently commenced in a number of new locations, including South Launceston in my home state of Tasmania. Over 14,500 homes and businesses can now connect to the NBN fibre network, and work is underway to connect a further 70,000 premises. When it comes to broadband speeds, Australia can afford to be bold. One of the disadvantages that Australia faces competing in the global economy is tyranny of distance. That's why we need to embrace a broadband strategy that features fibre optic cables delivering world-class internet speeds straight to homes and businesses. For too long, people living in rural and remote areas in my home state of Tasmania, and in fact around Australia, have had to put up with slow, unreliable ADSL services. Some have endured the frustration of not being able to connect at all. Labor believes that fast broadband should not be seen as a privilege enjoyed by some, but rather as an essential utility, just like water or electricity, that should be available to everyone. The NBN will keep the Australian economy expanding and leads to innovation, improvements in lives of Australians that weren't considered possible until now. If we look at the benefits, not only to businesses and to us as private citizens, but for our schools, as far as health is concerned, the only complaint I get when I move around Tasmania, and in fact when I move around other parts of Australia, is that they want broadband and they want it now. I'm very proud that this government has taken the lead after 11.5 very long years of the Howard Coalition government being in there and not investing in Australia's future or our economy.
Thank you, Senator.